Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us some really thought-provoking stuff this time,
Yeah.
all focused on, how we let go of the past and really step into what's next.
Oh, and
Think of this as, well, your shortcut to understanding the core ideas and the practical steps that actually make a difference.
right. Getting to the heart of it.
Exactly. We've got a chapter here diving deep into personal growth, and our mission today, it's to pull out the insights that you can actually use.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about how to truly release what's behind you and build a future that feels genuinely fulfilling without getting sort of bogged down in overly complicated self-help speak.
Exactly. We want to get beyond just the surface level advice
Hmm.
and explore the real mechanisms, how leaving the past behind works in a way that's both effective and, healthy for you.
Okay, so let's jump right in then. One of the first things that struck me is this idea of self-reinvention.
Mm-hmm.
The chapter talks about it as this continuous natural process we experience throughout life. It even uses the analogy of our bodies constantly renewing themselves cell by cell.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
It makes you think about how fundamentally we're designed to evolve, not just physically, but also, well, in our minds and emotions.
That's a key point to understand,
Yeah.
definitely. And it highlights why resisting this inherent drive for change can be so painful, right?
Right.
We can become attached to familiar ways of being, even if they cause us suffering, when the natural trajectory of life is towards growth, towards transformation.
Yeah.
As the chapter emphasizes, those unresolved emotions we carry from the past, they aren't just relics. They actively shape our present and future in often, unseen ways.
That makes sense.
That's why consciously learning how to release the past is so, essential for well-being.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a piece of advice I'm sure you've heard countless times. Just let it go or move on.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It sounds so simple, but when you're truly wrestling with the past, it can feel incredibly dismissive.
It really can.
The chapter really validates that frustration, explaining that it's not just a matter of deciding to stop caring, especially when that past experience provided something vital like safety, security, or love.
Precisely. Telling someone to simply let go is like telling a plant to stop needing water, isn't it?
Yeah.
It ignores the deeply rooted attachments and emotional connections. What's insightful here is the chapter's perspective that genuine letting go isn't about forcing something out of your mind.
Okay.
It's more about actively building something new in your life.
Building something new.
Yeah, think of it like that classic mind game, try your hardest not to picture a bright pink elephant.
Right, you immediately picture it.
Exactly. The more you try to suppress the image, the more persistent it becomes. Similarly, forcefully trying to release a significant emotional attachment often just strengthens its hold on us.
That makes so much sense. So the focus shifts then from this forceful eviction of the past to a much more compassionate approach,
Yes.
which involves allowing ourselves to actually feel and even grieve what we've lost. The chapter suggests that loss, as painful as it is, can actually serve as a powerful catalyst for profound personal growth,
Right.
almost as if it clears the space for something more fulfilling to emerge.
Exactly right. It's about acknowledging the real impact of the past, giving yourself permission to process those emotions fully,
Right.
and then, crucially, taking those small, consistent steps towards creating a new reality.
Small steps.
Yeah, it's not about finding an instant fix. It's a gradual unfolding. And as you actively engage in building this new chapter, you'll start to notice those moments, perhaps brief at first, where the past no longer dominates your thoughts. Those are the quiet indicators that you're moving forward,
Yeah.
In a healthy way.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I thought. The chapter introduces this fascinating psychological trick for releasing old experiences.
Oh, yeah. It explains that even though a past event is over in reality, it can still hold a powerful emotional charge, almost like we're emotionally stuck in that time.
Stuck.
And often these experiences are linked to something we deeply desired but didn't receive.
Yeah. That's fascinating, the idea that we can become emotionally tethered to these past moments of unmet need,
Right.
which can inadvertently hinder our present growth. The psychological trick the chapter outlines offers a really potent way to address this.
Okay, so what is it?
It involves intentionally revisiting that memory, not to re-experience the pain exactly, but to engage with your younger self from the perspective of who you are now.
Your healed self, sort of.
Yeah, someone who has likely grown and healed since then.
Right. The chapter guides you to gently close your eyes, locate that uncomfortable feeling in your body, almost treating it as a doorway.
Right, tuning into the physical sensation.
And mindfully trace it back to its origin, to that specific memory or experience.
And then the core of this technique is to superimpose a new narrative onto that memory. Okay, superimpose. How?
Imagine being present with your younger self during that difficult time, offering the comfort, the understanding, the guidance that you might have needed then.
Ah, I see.
The chapter provides really specific examples, like soothing a heartbroken younger self or offering practical advice during a moment of confusion. The core insight here is that your past self needs the wisdom and compassion of your present self to heal. It's about offering that internal parental love you might have lacked.
Wow. It's about mentally reassuring that younger version of you that, well, everything ultimately works out, that their fears are largely unfounded, and that positive experiences are indeed on the horizon.
Exactly.
The goal isn't to rewrite history because that's impossible, right?
Right, you can't change the facts.
But to diffuse that old emotional intensity and reconnect that part of yourself with the present moment. By shifting your perspective of the past, you change how it affects you now.
Precisely. By offering that younger self what they needed, you're essentially rewriting the emotional story associated with that event. This could free you up, help you move forward without being burdened by that old emotional weight.
That's powerful. The chapter then touches on something that resonates deeply with real life. How the world just keeps turning, even after really significant, potentially traumatic events.
Yeah, life goes on, doesn't it?
And there's often this unspoken pressure to just pick yourself up and carry on. We don't always get the time or space we truly need to process things that have profoundly impacted us.
It's a critical observation. We might outwardly appear to have moved on, maybe with a new job, a new relationship, a change of scenery.
Sure.
But as the chapter rightly emphasizes, you carry your inner world with you. Those unprocessed emotions and experiences, they remain within you, influencing your thoughts, feelings, behaviors. You can't truly leave yourself behind.
And it clarifies that dwelling on the past isn't necessarily about a conscious desire to return to it. It's often just a sign of the deep impact that event had on you. A signal that it needs to be acknowledged, understood, and integrated into your life's story.
Exactly. It's not a sign of weakness or being stuck. It's actually a very normal and healthy human response to significant experiences.
That's reassuring.
The resurfacing of past hurts can be viewed as an opportunity, really, for deeper healing. A chance to finally bring those shadows into the light and say, it's okay, I see you, and I'm ready to release you with grace.
Release you with grace. I like that. This flows really well into the idea of letting go of unrealistic expectations. The chapter really challenges this pervasive notion that happiness will only arrive once we've achieved some perfect version of ourselves or our lives. I'll be happy when.
Oh, absolutely. The when-then trap. What's insightful here is the argument that genuine change and fulfillment don't hinge on achieving some flawless future state.
Okay.
They begin when we learn to accept and embrace ourselves fully, right here, in the present moment, complete with all our imperfections.
So that constant striving for some idealized future.
It can actually be a subtle way of avoiding discomfort with the here and now.
Ah, okay. It beautifully highlights the courage involved in showing up authentically exactly as you are.
Yeah.
And how that genuine presence is what truly attracts meaningful connections and a sense of fulfillment. It even draws a parallel with nature,
Right.
reminding us that imperfection isn't just normal, it's actually essential for growth and beauty.
Right. Think about a perfectly manicured garden versus a wild meadow. There's a different kind of vitality and resilience in embracing the natural variations and imperfections, isn't there?
Totally.
Similarly, in our own lives, those perceived flaws can be the very things that make us unique and allow for growth.
Okay, this phrase really stood out to me. What leaves the path is clearing the path.
Powerful.
The chapter discusses the internal struggle we sometimes face when holding on to things, relationships, jobs, beliefs that deep down we know are no longer serving us.
That's a powerful way to frame it, yes. The chapter suggests that what isn't truly aligned with our well-being will eventually fall away from our lives one way or another.
Whether we like it or not, sometimes.
Sometimes, yes. And trying to force something that's fundamentally wrong creates a significant internal conflict, which can be incredibly draining and even mistaken for passion because of the intensity of the emotions involved.
Mistaken for passion. Interesting. It touches on how we can become so attached to the potential of something, right?
Oh, yes. The fantasy.
The idealized version we've created in our minds, that we often ignore the reality of what it actually is. And sometimes life intervenes and removes what isn't right for us, even when we're actively resisting that change.
Precisely. Because at a deeper level, we often have an intuitive knowing when something isn't right. We can feel it in our gut.
A little voice.
Yeah. That constant effort required to maintain it, that persistent sense of unease, those are often clear indicators. And letting go of what's not meant for us isn't a loss in the truest sense. It's actually creating essential space for what is genuinely meant to flourish in our lives. The fear of the unknown often fuels that clinging to the unsuitable.
Sure, the familiar feels safer.
But the chapter suggests that true security comes from aligning ourselves with what truly fits our authentic selves.
The conversation then takes an important turn towards the impact of emotional trauma. And the chapter makes a really crucial point. It's not just a metaphorical in-your-head issue.
Absolutely not.
It has very real, tangible effects on the physical body and the brain.
What's vital to understand is that trauma, as the chapter explains it, is essentially unresolved fear.
Unresolved fear.
It triggers a sustained activation of our body's natural fight-or-flight response, that primal survival mechanism, leading to a fundamental disruption in our sense of safety and security.
And this has neurological consequences.
Measurable ones, yes. Essentially, trauma puts your brain on high alert, making you more reactive and less able to think clearly about the future.
Wow. The chapter details how, in response to trauma, the brain can temporarily reorganize itself to become hypervigilant for potential threats.
Right, scanning the environment.
Leading to increased anxiety, rumination, and a pervasive feeling that the world is unsafe. It even mentions specific brain regions that are affected.
Yeah, the hippocampus for memory, the amygdala for emotions, the prefrontal cortex for planning.
And explains how these changes impact memory formation, emotional regulation, and the ability to plan for the future. It's quite detailed.
And it underscores the difference between our ancient survival needs focused on immediate physical threats and our modern concerns around self-actualization, belonging, social safety.
Right, very different worlds.
So recovery from trauma, the chapter emphasizes, isn't about broadly improving your life in every area. It's about specifically restoring that feeling of safety and security in the particular context where the trauma occurred.
Okay, that's specific.
For example, if a past betrayal in a friendship caused trauma, the healing comes from building new, trustworthy connections, not necessarily from, say, achieving professional success. That wouldn't fix the core issue.
That makes sense. This leads to a concept I found really insightful, the idea of an emotional backlog.
Right.
The chapter uses a very relatable analogy, comparing it to an overflowing email inbox.
Good one.
All those unexpressed and unprocessed emotions accumulating, and if you ignore them for too long, you end up missing important information, insights you need to move forward.
Exactly. And the chapter stresses that emotions are not optional extras in the human experience. We might try to suppress or avoid them through various means, numbing substances, projecting onto others, just holding chronic tension.
Yeah, we find ways.
But eventually that backlog needs to be addressed. What's particularly insightful here is the explanation of how unfelt emotions actually become physically embodied.
Embodied. How does that work?
The chapter discusses this motor component of emotions. How even before we consciously register a feeling, it triggers subtle muscular activations in the body.
Subconscious reactions.
Kind of. And because the emotional centers of the brain are closely linked to the motor regions, these unfelt emotions can literally become trapped as patterns of tension in different parts of the body.
Whoa! Like where?
It provides such vivid and relatable examples. Fear often manifesting as tension in the stomach.
Butterflies. Yeah.
Grief as a heavy feeling in the chest. Stress accumulating in the shoulders.
Oh, definitely the shoulders.
Goes even deeper, explaining how consistently suppressing natural instincts, like wanting to assert a boundary but holding back, can lead to chronic tension in specific areas like the neck or throat. The body, the chapter suggests, communicates with us through these voiceless physical sensations.
So how do we begin to address and release this embodied emotional backlog?
Yeah.
The chapter offers some really practical strategies, starting with meditation, but perhaps with a slightly different focus than we might typically expect.
Right. Instead of viewing meditation as a tool to force a state of perfect calm, which can be frustrating,
Very frustrating sometimes.
the chapter reframes it as a valuable opportunity to simply observe your feelings, whether it's anger, sadness, anxiety, without immediately reacting to them or judging them.
Just noticing.
Exactly. It's about allowing those thoughts and sensations to arise and pass without getting caught up in their narrative.
Then there's the technique of breath scans. What's that?
It involves using slow, deliberate breathing to become more aware of areas in your body where you might be holding residual tension.
Scanning with the breath.
Yeah. Once you identify these areas, the chapter suggests gently exploring the feelings that might be associated with that tension. Through visualization, maybe journaling, reminding us that the body often speaks in symbolic language.
Metaphors and muscle tension.
You can say that.
Yeah.
And finally, and perhaps most importantly, the chapter underscores the fundamental need to actually feel our emotions fully.
Not just think about them.
Exactly. This might mean allowing ourselves to experience moments of intense sadness or frustration. Or it might involve physical release through activities like exercise, or simply allowing ourselves to cry without judgment.
Letting it out.
Yes. The key takeaway is that emotional health isn't about striving for constant happiness. It's about cultivating the capacity to experience the full spectrum of human emotions without getting stuck or overwhelmed by any single one.
The chapter then delves into a deeper understanding of what it truly means to heal your mind. And it makes a really significant distinction between healing a physical ailment and, well, mental and emotional healing.
That's crucial.
It's not simply about repairing something that's broken. It's about a fundamental transformation into a new version of yourself.
Exactly. The chapter describes healing as a process that can feel uncomfortable, disruptive at times, but ultimately it's an essential journey.
A necessary disruption.
You could say that. It's about returning to our inherent state of freedom, authenticity, and unconditional self-acceptance. And navigating this journey requires honest self-reflection, acknowledging those deeply held grudges, longings, fears that we might have been consciously or unconsciously avoiding.
Tasting the tough stuff.
It's about fully experiencing our emotions, even the most painful ones, rather than trying to sanitize them or recreate a more palatable version.
No filter.
No filtering. It also addresses the common misconception that healing is this neat, linear progression.
Yeah, it rarely feels like that.
It introduces this important concept of positive disintegration.
Positive disintegration sounds intense.
Think of it like renovating a house. You might need to tear down some old walls and structures before you can build something new and stronger.
Okay. Makes sense.
Similarly, in healing, old, unhelpful patterns might need to break down before new, healthier ones can emerge. Ultimately, healing is about actively building a life that truly aligns with who you are over time. Learning from past mistakes, confronting our own internal negativity, choosing the discomfort of growth over the discomfort of stagnation.
Choosing growth. The chapter concludes with a really powerful message about moving forward. It's not about seeking external validation or getting revenge.
No, not at all.
The real transformation happens within.
That's the core of it.
Right. It critiques the idea of a glow-up that's solely focused on superficial changes, trying to prove something to others.
Yeah, the external show.
And instead defines a true inner transformation as this profound sense of internal contentment and genuine hope for the future that gradually diminishes the hold of the past.
It's about how things feel on the inside, not just how they appear on the outside.
Exactly.
And it wisely points out that those who have genuinely undergone a significant inner shift are often less concerned with broadcasting it to the world.
They don't need to prove it.
Their focus naturally turns towards cultivating internal qualities like self-respect, nurturing authentic relationships, experiencing emotional freedom, achieving mental clarity, developing a more compassionate outlook. True accomplishments aren't always visible on the surface.
So important to remember. The chapter ends by prompting us to examine our own motivations for seeking change. The real journey, it suggests, is about personal growth and striving to meet our own potential. Guided by our own internal compass rather than the need for external approval or validation.
And that brings us pretty much to the end of this in-depth exploration into releasing the past. We've covered quite a bit.
We really have.
How it's a natural part of life, why forcing it doesn't work, the power of reframing past experiences, the importance of acknowledging the past's impact,
Letting go of unrealistic expectations, trusting the natural course of things.
the body's role in trauma and emotions, practical release strategies, the transformative nature of mental healing.
And finally, that true progress is an internal journey, not an external show. We covered everything in the chapter.
Your comprehensive look.
So as you navigate your day, maybe just take a moment. Consider one specific area of your past that you might begin to look at with fresh eyes. Or perhaps one way you could start to gently acknowledge and release some of that stored emotional tension in your body.
Small steps.
Small steps. And really think about what an authentic glow-up means for you personally, moving beyond any external measures of success or a desire for revenge. Thanks for diving deep with us.